The day a billionaire lost a bet was the day he met the only woman who didn't care who he was. The laughter rolled across the private dining room like expensive champagne. Crystal glasses clinked beneath warm golden lights. Outside, Manhattan shimmered through floor-to-ceiling windows, a sea of white and gold stretching for miles. Inside, 12 of the city's most successful executives sat around a polished walnut table worth more than most people's cars. At the head of it all sat Ethan Crawford. 47. Billionaire. CEO. The man business magazines called untouchable. Ethan glanced at his Swiss watch and shook his head. "You're all wasting your money." More laughter followed. "Come on," said Richard Bennett, one of his oldest friends. "You've turned down every woman we've introduced you to for 3 years." Ethan leaned back in his chair. Calm. Unbothered. Because none of them were right. Or maybe, another friend said with a grin, "You've forgotten how to fall in love." The table erupted. Ethan smiled politely. The kind of smile that never fully reached his eyes. Love isn't a business strategy. That wasn't the question. Richard raised his glass. The question is simple. Are you ever going to let anyone into your life? For a moment, Ethan stared out at the city. Thousands of lights. Millions of people. Endless noise. Yet somehow, silence felt easier. "No," he finally said. The room grew quieter. "No." Richard repeated. "No," Ethan shrugged. "I've met enough people to know exactly what they want when they look at me." Nobody answered. Because everyone knew he was right. Some wanted access. Some wanted status. Some wanted the fortune attached to his name. But very few ever saw the man behind it. Ethan stood and adjusted his navy suit jacket. "You can keep trying if you want." His voice remained steady. Controlled. "But I'm never falling in love again." A few whistles echoed around the table. Someone pulled out a wallet. Another followed. Then another. Richard started laughing. "Gentlemen," he announced dramatically. "I think we officially have ourselves a bet." More money landed on the table. 6 months, Richard declared. "I say Ethan meets someone before Christmas." "Impossible," Ethan replied immediately. "That sounds exactly like something a man says 5 minutes before destiny embarrasses him." The room exploded again. Ethan shook his head and headed toward the exit. Still smiling. Still certain. Still convinced he understood exactly how his future would unfold. What he didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that less than 24 hours later, a sharp-tongued chef with honey blonde hair, a fearless attitude, and absolutely no interest in billionaires was about to make that certainty disappear. The next afternoon, sunlight poured through the tall windows of Bellamy House, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. The lunch crowd had not arrived yet. Servers polished glasses. Managers reviewed reservations. In the kitchen, however, the day was already moving at full speed. Claire Whitmore stood at the center of it all. "No, not that plate," she said without even turning around. "The rosemary goes on the left side. We are serving guests, not confusing them." A young line cook immediately corrected the mistake. Claire continued working. Calm. Focused. Precise. Her white chef coat was spotless despite the chaos surrounding her. Her honey blonde hair was tied back neatly. There was nothing dramatic about her presence. Yet somehow everyone listened when she spoke. Respect did not arrive because she demanded it. It arrived because she earned it every day. A delivery driver pushed through the back entrance carrying boxes. "Morning, chef. You are 20 minutes late, Mike." The man winced. "Traffic." Claire raised an eyebrow. That excuse was old 5 years ago. Several cooks laughed. Even Mike grinned. Everybody knew Claire had a sharp tongue, but there was never cruelty behind it. Only honesty. As she reviewed inventory, one of the waitresses rushed into the kitchen holding a tablet. "You are not going to believe this." Claire barely looked up. "That sentence usually means I am about to lose precious minutes of my life." More laughter followed. The waitress turned the screen around. An article filled the display. The headline featured Ethan Crawford beside a luxury hotel. Project worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "Apparently he was here last month," the waitress said. Private dinner. Entire dining room closed. Claire glanced at the photo for less than 2 seconds. Wonderful. She returned to her clipboard. "Does he know how to cook?" "No." "Then I am not interested." The kitchen erupted. The waitress stared. "That is it. That is it." Claire shrugged. People act like money is a personality trait. Unknown to everyone in the room, a man standing near the office doorway had heard every word. Ethan Crawford had arrived 15 minutes earlier for a confidential meeting with the restaurant owner. He had been walking toward the dining room when Claire's comment stopped him cold. People act like money is a personality trait. Ethan paused. Slowly. For the first time in years, someone had dismissed his reputation with complete indifference. No excitement. No admiration. No calculation. Just indifference. Strangely, he could not stop thinking about it. And when Claire disappeared deeper into the kitchen without bothering to learn who had overheard her, something unexpected happened. Ethan Crawford smiled. 2 days later, Ethan told himself he was returning to Bellamy House for a perfectly rational reason. The restaurant was excellent. The service was discreet. The food was among the best in Manhattan. That was the story he repeated during the 20-minute drive downtown. Unfortunately, it was also a lie. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the restaurant windows, casting long golden reflections across the polished floors. The lunch rush had ended. The dinner crowd had not yet arrived. It was the quiet hour between worlds. Ethan was shown to a corner table overlooking the open kitchen. From there, he could see Claire moving between stations with effortless authority. She never raised her voice. She never demanded attention. Yet every cook watched her. Every server listened. Respect seemed to follow her naturally. Ethan opened the menu. Then closed it. His eyes drifted back toward the kitchen. Claire was explaining a recipe adjustment to a young cook. The woman nodded immediately. No argument. No hesitation. Ethan found himself studying the scene longer than he intended. Strange. In boardrooms, authority was measured through titles and ownership percentages. Here, it seemed to come from competence alone. A waiter approached. "Good afternoon, Mr. Crawford. The chef recommends the roasted sea bass today." Ethan nodded. "That sounds fine." 20 minutes later the plate arrived. Perfectly presented. Precise. Elegant. He took a bite. Then another. The dish was exceptional. Before he could stop himself, he asked a question. "Did Chef Whitmore create this?" The waiter smiled. "Every seasonal menu item comes from her." Ethan simply nodded, but something shifted inside him. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Claire had already noticed he was back. Not because she cared. At least that was what she told herself. It was difficult not to notice a 6'2" billionaire sitting alone in a tailored navy suit for the second time that week. One of the servers leaned toward her. "You know he came back because of you." Claire did not even look up from her prep station. "Then he needs a hobby." The server laughed. Claire did not. Seriously, the woman continued. "Most people would be thrilled." Claire finally glanced toward the dining room. Ethan happened to be looking in her direction at the exact same moment. Their eyes met. Just briefly. 1 second. Maybe less. Claire looked away first. I have 30 pounds of produce arriving tomorrow morning. That is what thrills me. Back in the dining room, Ethan watched her return to work as if nothing had happened. No smile. No special treatment. No attempt to impress him. For reasons he could not explain, that made him want to come back again. Over the next 2 weeks, a pattern quietly emerged. Every Thursday afternoon, Ethan Crawford appeared at Bellamy House. Always the same table. Always alone. At first, Claire ignored it. Then she noticed the staff had started noticing it too. "Your billionaire is here again," one of the servers whispered as she carried plates toward the dining room. Claire rolled her eyes. "He is not my billionaire." "Sure he is. The tomatoes are more interesting than he is." Yet even as she said it, she glanced toward the dining room. Ethan was reading something on his tablet. Calm. Focused. Completely unaware that half the kitchen had turned him into a running joke. The strange part was that he never asked for special treatment. Never complained. Never requested private accommodations. For someone with his reputation, he was surprisingly easy to serve. That afternoon, a supplier arrived with a shipment that immediately created problems. Claire opened a crate and frowned. The produce quality was unacceptable. Several items were bruised. Others were nearly unusable. "You charged premium prices for this?" she asked. The supplier spread his hands. "Everybody cuts corners sometimes." Claire's expression hardened. "Not in my kitchen." The discussion continued for several minutes. Firm. Professional. Uncomfortable. Eventually the supplier agreed to replace everything. As he left, several employees exchanged relieved looks. One young cook shook his head. "I do not know how you do that." Claire returned to her station. "Do what?" "Tell people exactly what they need to hear without being afraid." Claire smiled faintly. Practice. Unbeknownst to her, Ethan had witnessed the entire exchange from his table. He had spent 25 years negotiating billion-dollar contracts. He recognized confidence when he saw it. Most people became cautious around authority. Claire seemed completely immune to it. Later that evening, as dinner service slowed, Ethan finally stood and walked toward the open kitchen. Several employees immediately noticed. A few exchanged curious looks. Claire was reviewing inventory numbers when a familiar voice interrupted her concentration. "I think you just terrified a supplier." She looked up. Ethan stood on the opposite side of the counter. Navy suit. Silver at his temples. That same calm expression. Claire returned to her paperwork. Then he should probably stop delivering terrible vegetables. Ethan actually laughed. A real laugh. Short but genuine. Claire paused. For some reason, that surprised her more than his presence. "Most people are intimidated by people like him," Ethan said. "Most people are intimidated by people like you," Claire replied. Their eyes met. Neither looked away. A few nearby employees suddenly found other things to focus on. Ethan smiled slightly. Claire did not. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan realized he was enjoying a conversation where nobody cared how much money he had. The following Thursday arrived with steady autumn rain tapping against the restaurant windows. The city outside looked softer somehow. Less hurried. Inside Bellamy House, dinner preparations were underway. Claire was reviewing schedules when she noticed one of the younger servers struggling near the service station. Emily was 22, hardworking, and usually cheerful. Tonight she looked exhausted. "You have been staring at the same tray for 3 minutes, Claire said. Emily forced a smile. "I am fine." Claire immediately knew that was not true. "Try again." The young woman hesitated. Then sighed. My dad's medical bills went up again. I am picking up extra shifts. It is nothing. Claire studied her for a moment. It is not nothing if it is keeping you from sleeping. Emily looked down. Claire disappeared into her office without another word. 10 minutes later she returned with a folder. There is a culinary scholarship fund that still has openings. I know the director. Emily blinked. You would do that? Claire looked genuinely confused. Of course I would. The young woman fought back tears. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. The application is 12 pages long. A small laugh escaped Emily despite herself. Nearby employees smiled. They had seen moments like this before. Claire never made speeches. Never looked for credit. She simply helped people when she could. Unnoticed from across the dining room, Ethan had witnessed the entire exchange. He had arrived earlier than usual and happened to be reviewing reports when the conversation unfolded. He watched Emily leave with a hopeful expression he had not seen before. Then he watched Claire immediately return to work as if nothing remarkable had happened. No announcement. No audience. No performance. Just kindness. Quiet kindness. Ethan set down his tablet. Something about that bothered him. Not because it was wrong. Because it was rare. In his world, generosity usually came with cameras, press releases, or strategic advantages. Claire seemed completely uninterested in recognition. Later that evening, as guests filled the restaurant and warm light reflected off crystal glassware, Ethan found himself standing near the kitchen entrance again. You help your employees a lot, he said. Claire glanced up while checking an order ticket. I help people who deserve help. Without expecting anything back. That is generally how helping works. Ethan paused. Then laughed softly. Claire finally looked at him. What? Nothing. He shook his head. I am just not used to hearing answers that simple. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Around them, plates moved. Conversations hummed. The city continued spinning outside. Yet something had changed. Ethan realized he was no longer curious about Claire because she challenged him. He was curious because she reminded him of something he had almost forgotten existed. Character. And for the first time since walking into Bellamy House, he was no longer thinking about how different she was from everyone else. He was wondering why everyone else seemed so different from her. 3 weeks later, the first snow of the season drifted across Manhattan. Soft white flakes swirled beneath the glow of streetlights as the city prepared for winter. Inside Bellamy House, the dinner rush had finally slowed. Most of the guests were gone. The staff moved through cleanup routines with the comfortable rhythm of people who had worked together for years. Ethan remained at his usual table. Not because he was hungry anymore. He knew that now. Across the room, Claire was helping stack inventory reports when the restaurant owner approached her carrying a thick envelope. It came again, he said quietly. Claire immediately frowned. You should not have accepted it. I did not. It is being returned tomorrow morning. Ethan was not trying to listen. But he happened to catch enough of the conversation to notice something unusual. Claire rarely looked uncomfortable. Yet for a brief moment, she did. The owner lowered his voice. You know the Academy Board is still asking about you. Claire exhaled slowly. That was years ago. People do not forget what you built. She shook her head. They should. The conversation ended there. Claire quickly returned to work. But Ethan found himself thinking about those words long after she disappeared into the kitchen. The next morning, curiosity got the better of him. During a meeting downtown, he casually mentioned Claire's name to someone in the culinary industry. What followed left him speechless. Years earlier, Claire Whitmore had founded one of the most respected culinary training programs on the East Coast. Her academy had produced award-winning chefs, restaurant owners, and hospitality leaders across the country. Articles described her as a rising force in American cuisine. A visionary. A mentor. A future celebrity chef. Then, almost overnight, she vanished. She sold everything. The academy. The property. Even her ownership rights. No scandal. No controversy. She simply walked away. Ethan spent the next hour reading archived interviews. The final article answered the mystery. Claire's younger sister had developed a serious illness requiring years of specialized treatment. Rather than seek publicity or sympathy, Claire liquidated her entire business to help her family. Afterward, she quietly returned to working in restaurants. No interviews. No headlines. No attempts to rebuild her public image. Ethan leaned back in his office chair and stared out at the snowy skyline. For several moments, he said nothing. Most people spent their lives chasing recognition. Claire had given hers away without hesitation. That evening, when he entered Bellamy House again, he looked at her differently. Not with admiration for success. Not with curiosity. With respect. Real respect. Claire noticed the change immediately. "What?" she asked from across the counter. Ethan paused. Then smiled faintly. "Nothing." But for the first time, he understood something important. The most impressive thing about Claire Whitmore was not what she had achieved. It was everything she had sacrificed without ever asking anyone to notice. December arrived with freezing winds and glittering holiday lights stretching across Fifth Avenue. The city seemed determined to celebrate. Ethan Crawford, however, found himself thinking about only one thing. For weeks, he had tried to understand Claire Whitmore. The more he learned, the less she made sense. She had walked away from success. She ignored status. She never treated him differently after discovering exactly who he was. And somehow, that mattered more than he wanted to admit. One Thursday evening, Ethan stood outside the kitchen entrance holding a cream-colored envelope. Claire noticed it immediately. "That looks expensive," she said while reviewing supplier invoices. "It probably is." Ethan smiled. "That is not a compliment." "No," Claire replied. "It rarely is." Ethan handed her the envelope. Claire opened it and quickly recognized the invitation. The Crawford Foundation Winter Gala. One of the most exclusive charity events in New York City. Business leaders. Celebrities. Politicians. Media. The kind of event most people would spend months trying to attend. Claire closed the envelope and handed it back. "No." Ethan blinked. "You did not even think about it." "I thought about it. For 2 seconds. That was enough." Ethan stared at her. "You have no idea what I was going to ask." Claire crossed her arms. "You were going to ask me to attend with you." Silence. Ethan looked genuinely surprised. "How did you know?" Claire laughed softly. "Because you have been coming here every week for 2 months, Ethan." For a moment neither spoke. Around them, cooks moved between stations. Plates rattled. Orders were called. Yet the conversation seemed strangely isolated from everything else. Ethan finally took a breath. "Then let me ask properly." His voice was calm. Serious. "Come with me." Claire studied him carefully. Not the billionaire. Not the public figure. Just the man standing in front of her. "Why?" she asked. Ethan paused. For the first time in years, he did not have a polished answer ready. "Because I enjoy spending time with you." Claire looked away briefly. Then back at him. "That is probably true." "It is. But that is not the real reason." Ethan frowned slightly. Claire continued. You want to bring me into your world. Maybe. And then what? Ethan had no immediate response. Claire smiled sadly. Not cruelly. Just honestly. I spent years building something important. Then I spent years learning who I was without it. I am not interested in becoming somebody's impressive guest at a fancy gala. Ethan opened his mouth. Then stopped. Because deep down, he knew she was right. Claire handed back the invitation. I like talking to you, Ethan. Her voice softened. But if you want me to know who you are, do not show me the ballroom. She stepped back toward the kitchen. Show me the person who exists after everybody else goes home. And for the second time since meeting Claire Whitmore, Ethan Crawford found himself standing completely speechless. The gala took place without Claire. Cameras flashed. Reporters filled the entrance. Industry leaders exchanged handshakes beneath towering crystal chandeliers. Everything looked exactly the way it always had. Perfect. Polished. Predictable. Yet Ethan spent most of the evening distracted. He smiled when required. Spoke when necessary. Accepted congratulations for projects he barely cared about in that moment. More than once, his eyes drifted toward the ballroom doors. As if part of him still expected Claire to walk through them. She never did. Around midnight, after the final speeches ended, Ethan returned to his penthouse overlooking Central Park. The city sparkled below. Normally, he enjoyed the view. Tonight it felt strangely empty. Claire's words returned to him. Show me the person who exists after everybody else goes home. He stood there for a long time. Silent. Thinking. The following week, something unusual happened. Ethan canceled 3 networking dinners. He declined 2 private events. Then, on a cold Saturday morning, he drove to an address he had quietly obtained from Bellamy House employees weeks earlier. Not Claire's address. A community center in Brooklyn. Snow covered the sidewalks. Children ran through the courtyard carrying boxes of donated supplies. Inside, volunteers prepared meals and organized educational programs. Ethan stepped through the front doors wearing a simple wool coat. No assistants. No security team. No media. Nobody recognized him. You here to help? Asked an older volunteer. Ethan hesitated. Yes. Good. The woman handed him a stack of folding chairs. Then start with those. For the next 3 hours, Ethan worked alongside strangers. He arranged tables. Moved supplies. Served coffee. Nobody asked about hotel acquisitions. Nobody cared about stock prices. Nobody knew his net worth. And surprisingly, he enjoyed it. More than any gala he could remember. Near noon, a familiar voice echoed across the room. You are terrible at stacking chairs. Ethan turned. Claire stood 20 feet away holding a clipboard. Her expression remained completely serious. For about 2 seconds. Then she smiled. Ethan laughed. Good morning to you too. What are you doing here? Claire asked. Working. Poorly. I am improving. Claire studied him carefully. There was no expensive suit. No public performance. No attempt to impress anyone. Just Ethan. For the first time since they met, she looked genuinely caught off guard. Around them, volunteers continued moving through the busy center. Children laughed in nearby classrooms. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, filling the room with warm afternoon light. Claire watched Ethan help an elderly volunteer carry supplies across the room. He never announced who he was. Never mentioned his success. Never sought recognition. Something shifted quietly inside her. Because for the first time, she was not seeing the billionaire everyone else knew. She was seeing the man he had chosen to become when nobody was watching. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm neither of them had expected. Every Saturday morning, Ethan appeared at the community center. At first, Claire assumed it would last a week or two. Then a month passed. Then another. He kept showing up. Rain. Snow. Freezing wind. It did not matter. He was there carrying boxes, serving meals, repairing shelves, and listening more than he talked. Nobody treated him like a billionaire. Most of the volunteers simply knew him as Ethan. Surprisingly, he seemed to prefer it that way. One bright winter morning, sunlight poured through the center's tall windows, filling the room with soft gold light. Claire stood near the coffee station, watching children prepare for a cooking workshop. Across the room, Ethan was helping a young volunteer assemble folding tables. He was laughing about something. A genuine laugh. Relaxed. Unforced. Claire found herself smiling before she realized it. "You are staring," an older volunteer whispered beside her. Claire immediately looked away. "I am observing." That is what people call staring when they do not want to admit it. Claire shook her head, but the volunteer's grin only widened. Later that afternoon, after the last families had gone home, the center grew quiet. Chairs were stacked. Supplies were stored away. The city outside glowed beneath a pale winter sky. Claire walked toward the front entrance carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. Ethan looked up from a table he had been wiping down. "For me?" he asked. "Do not get used to it." He accepted the cup anyway. They stepped outside together. The street was calm. Snow covered the nearby rooftops. For a while, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Familiar. Then Claire glanced toward him. "You know something?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What?" Claire smiled softly. "You never did show me the ballroom." Ethan laughed quietly. "I think you made it very clear you were not interested." "I was not. And now?" For a moment, Claire looked out across the city. Then back at him. Her expression was calm. "Certain. Now I think I finally met the person who exists after everybody else goes home." Ethan froze. Not because he did not understand. Because he did. Every word. A slow smile appeared. The kind that reached his eyes this time. Claire held out a small card. "There is a restaurant opening next Friday." Ethan accepted it carefully. And I was wondering if you would like to have dinner with me." For the first time since making that confident declaration months earlier, Ethan Crawford had absolutely nothing clever to say. He simply smiled and nodded. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are not the ones who demand attention. They are the ones who quietly raise the standard, and change everyone around them without ever asking for credit.